All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's a couple minutes past 1:30, so we'll go ahead and call the Public Safety Funding Committee to order. Danny, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Lewis, Dr. Carter, Chief Butler, Chief Tobin, Jason Brand,
Here.
Ms. Calderon,
Here.
Ms. Lanning, Dr. Noggle, Ms. Broderick.
Present.
Great, thank you. I guess we'll go ahead and move into our first item, introduction of new committee staff. Zach?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I am excited to announce that we have a new director staffing the committee. Her name is Danny DeHogue. She's been with Maricopa County since 2016, serving in the Government Relations Department. She's been integral to many of the initiatives that the county has pushed forward down at the Capitol, and she will be a huge help to this committee. And she's the person that we need to lead it. So thanks, Danny, for joining us.
Thanks so much, and I really appreciate your guys' support. I'm looking forward to working on this with you all. It's a really important issue, so I appreciate your time, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, Danny. On behalf of the committee, welcome, and we really look forward to working with you. Second up, note the opportunity for public comment. Public comment will be open for a minimum of 30 minutes, remain open until the adjournment of the meeting. Comments will be accepted electronically in writing on the link provided on the posted agenda. And obviously, if anyone in the room can let staff know if they have a comment to provide. And with that, I guess we'll move on to item number 3, the overview of committees and legislative action leading to propositions 400, 401, and 411. Zach, I think that's yours too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Joining me is Michelle Hyman, Director of Government Relations for Maricopa County. Together, we will present this topic. To date, you all have been briefed and chosen the administrative aspects of the committee, public meeting, open meeting law, bylaws, creating officers. You've also received some briefings on how Maricopa County budget works and how the detention fund has been used historically. And so now we're on to the past committee's work and operation. And this presentation is meant to give you the context to help formulate your own thoughts on how the current committee should attack this issue. Before I jump in, I do kind of want to frame what preceded the past committee's work, and that dates us all the way back to June of 1977 when a federal lawsuit was filed against Maricopa County dealing with the overcrowding of pretrial inmates in county jails. That was Hart v. Hill. That judgment was signed and new jails were constructed in the 80s, 1981, which was the Towers Jail, and 1985, which was the Madison Street Jail. In the early 90s, bond elections failed in an attempt to deal with that overcrowding. And in the early to mid-90s, the county experienced an infrastructure crisis, falling behind maintaining and building jails. During the 90s, the county population increased by just under 1 million. That was the fastest and largest population increase in any county in the country. And so in 1997, the county formed what was called the Citizens Advisory Committee on Jail Planning. It was formed by the Board of Supervisors, and this committee has followed that same formula for developing our committee makeup. During that time, a consultant contract was awarded to some nationally recognized consultants, and they held 19 public meetings over the year to present their findings. Consultant number 1 led a facilities assessment master plan for the future needs, cost analysis, and financial analysis options. Consultant 2 was responsible for the needs and system assessment and recommendations for the staffing and operations for the juvenile system, and Consultant 3 did the same for the adult system. Of note, that first committee's role was largely to create what the master plan then became for Maricopa County so that they could build and maintain their jail system. Since then, Maricopa County has taken it upon itself in their operations through the Facilities Management Department to continue that work. And so I think one of the large differences between that committee's effort and this committee's effort is that that work continues to be done. And in fact, you'll get a jail master plan update later in this meeting from the Facilities Management Director, C.J. Jones. And so I think it's good context for you all to have as we move forward with consultants. that work is done, you'll be able to see the current assessment and decide, from the adult probation, juvenile probation, recidivism efforts, what on top of that jail planning needs to be done. Included, or what we have for you as a handout, is the committee meeting schedule from 1997. I wanted you all to see this so you could see where we are in comparison to that committee. We are basically on par with where they were in their discovery phase, which then would lead soon quickly into a tour and public outreach phase, culminating with consultant reports, draft reports, public comment, and then a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. So as we continue on, I wanted to make sure you had that in front of you as a reference point as we continue to move forward. After that committee's work was done, a recommendation was ultimately made to the board of a transaction privilege tax of 1/3 of a cent. The committee determined that would provide sufficient funding for construction and future operations. And following the construction of the new facilities, that tax would continue to a lower rate of 1/5 of a cent to pay for the cost of maintenance and operations. The next step after that recommendation was made to the Board of Supervisors and adopted in a joint meeting was our government relations team getting that legislation passed through the legislature.
Thanks, Zach. So on the screen is sort of a snapshot here of the historical legislative context from 1998. What I really wanted to sort of emphasize in this slide is the fact that what was introduced, which followed the committee's recommendations and the board's adopted that, is not what was passed by the legislature, right? So it started out as 1/3 of a cent for the first 3 years, went to 1/5 of a cent for the next 7 years. It also included a proposed tax on jet fuel at 2 different rates depending on the time. It allowed the board by resolution to increase or decrease the rate within those caps, and allowed them to submit 10-year extensions to the voters. It exempted funds that were collected by this tax from the county's expenditure limit and included the maintenance of effort language. A lot of that was stripped out, and we ended up with 1/5 of a cent for 9 years, or up to $900 million, whichever came first. It did continue to allow the board to have the authority to change the rate within the cap, and it included the maintenance of effort language, which I believe you've been briefed on to the budget, but it's essentially keeps some county skin in the game, right, through the general fund dollars. So just wanted to make that distinction there. The second slide here shows what the monies collected could be used for. So in addition to the construction of new adult and juvenile jail facilities and the maintenance and operation of those facilities, I won't list all of those for you, but it did enumerate allowable uses there. Implementing what we call ICJIS, the Integrated Criminal Justice Information System, expanding pretrial release supervision, implementing electronic monitoring, et cetera. So this, it did, interestingly, it passed out, not party line, but it was a 31 vote out of the House, and there's a little bit larger margin coming out of the Senate. We're in different legislative times than we were in the late 90s, so I can provide any of that background for you if you're interested, but I think the major takeaways were what was introduced, what kind of got pared down, and then the fact that it ended up being 2 separate questions to have the approval of the tax and then the expenditure limit. So that's why we had the 2 at the time that Zach's going to talk about. So any questions about that?
Can you, obviously with the rate coming down, that suggests that was a key element for the legislative negotiations. Were there any others that were like primary interests through all 3 of the enactments that you'd say are probably like the core elements that the legislature would be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to go back because sadly they didn't have the same, like we can't go back and watch the videos from the late 90s, so I can't see a lot of those negotiations, but clearly the rate was important, and when we get to the renewal or the continuation piece, like it all stayed the same at the 1/5 cent. So they were not interested in increasing it over that.
Thank you.
time. Does that answer?
It does,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. We're kind of piecing some of it together from back then.
After the legislature voted to approve that bill, SB 1426, it was then sent to the voters, and the two questions, as Michelle mentioned, the first one was Prop 400, which passed by 69%, and then the second one was Prop 401, which passed by 70%. 400 was the temporary sales tax, that 1/5 cent sales tax, and 401 was the expenditure limit increase for Maricopa County, and so that they were able to use the money collected. Of note, there's also a constitutional provision that allows counties to exempt capital expenditures for building jail facilities from the expenditure limit. And so just keep that in mind moving forward, that if we were to remain the same, that exemption exists for us. On to 1999, after that passed the voters, the Citizens Advisory Committee on Jail Planning changed its name to the Citizens Oversight Committee and adjusted its charge from doing its research and providing a recommendation to the board to becoming a promises made, promises kept committee, where they would meet regularly to assess how Maricopa County was executing on the jail master plan and the other recommendations that was made to the Board of Supervisors and then passed. And that work continued from 1999 until 2005. It was around 2001 when that committee in Maricopa County realized that they would hit that $900 million cap before the term of the temporary tax expired. And so in 2001, that work began, and in 2002, Maricopa County went back to the voters to renew that question.
So House Bill 2313 authorized Maricopa County to go back to the voters for a 20-year extension at 1/5 of a cent, which maintained the rate. It maintained the same list, which I didn't put back on here, of allowable uses, but notably included renovating existing facilities in addition to new builds as part of the allowable use, and implementing other programs designed to reduce the expense of adult and juvenile facilities. So we did get a little more, I think, flexibility there. The MOE was included, and we didn't have to go back for the ELR because the voters had already approved the capital construction, and that could be exempt. So this passed by a higher margin, I think, than the original did, which is interesting. And we hit the $900 million mark in March of 2007, so that's when the Prop 411 kicked in, starting the 20-year time clock, which will expire in March of 2027. So the numbers are a little bit wonky, but hopefully that provides some kind of guidelines around why we're there.
And as Michelle said, that extension did pass 69% to 30% on the ballot. And that has taken us to the current date where we are with this committee. The FY24 budget anticipates that the jail excise tax will bring in about $270 million in revenue. And today, based on that, we have a couple presentations after us, as I mentioned, that will help continue to form that discovery phase. One from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, where I think they will detail out their detention operations and how they use the detention fund, and one from the Facilities Management Department, where they will detail the current state of the jail master plan. With that, we'll take any questions.
Well, thank you. It's a great presentation on the background there. I guess members, any questions? None yet. Mayor Lewis or Brian, do you have any online?
I do not.
Okay, well, thank you.
No, I'm good. Thank you. Good presentation.
That we did have a couple members join us online, Chair Lewis and Mr. Tobin. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. We'll move on.
Sorry I got knocked out or I clicked the wrong X, but I jumped right back in. And Brian, I was having the same problem. I wasn't sure why I wasn't in, but finally.
All right, great.
So.
We'll move on, I guess, then to The next presentation from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, Chief Dawson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Dawson. I'm the Chief over Jail Operations for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. And before I go on with my presentation, I wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to the committee for taking time out of your careers, your days, your family to do this important work. It's a true service, and we appreciate you from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. So I was kind of asked today to be a little slow, to basically give a kind of a brief overview of the funding sources that fund our very large jail operation over there in Maricopa County. And also, you'll see me smiling a little bit throughout this because I get to talk some of the behind the scenes of where those dollars go, meaning I get to show off a little bit of the hard work that our staff is doing out there, and and just what it takes to run a jail operation of this size. So we're pretty proud of it. So one thing, we're obviously here to talk about that detention fund and where those jail tax dollars go. And I think it's also important to show that there are other detention-specific funds that help fund the jail systems and how we use those as well. There's essentially three funds over there. There's the detention fund, inmate services fund, and our jail enhancement fund. There's other funds over there, the general fund and some compliance dollars and things like that, but those in and of themselves don't really touch the detention side too often. So just to touch on those a little bit, jail enhancement funds. This one's kind of interesting because it does come from the state coffers. There's a percentage of the Criminal Justice Enhancement Fund every year is actually given to the Department of Corrections, and then they allocate that out to the 15 county sheriffs, basically for jail facilities, operations, for upgrades, things like that, and as well as staff training. It's a restricted fund. We can't use it to fund staffing or anything like that, and in most cases we can't use it to replace old equipment, only to buy new equipment, if that makes sense. So MCSO utilizes that for jail physical plant improvements, purchasing new equipment, and to fund staff training. So if one of my members of our special response team needs to go get some specialized tactical training that's only offered out of state, we're able to dip into this fund and not have to touch the detention fund in order to provide that critical training. We usually get about $1 million a year in that fund. So the next up, Inmate Services Fund. This is a very restricted fund. I'll just start out by that, but I like to say it's funded by the inmates for the inmates. You kind of look at some of those revenue sources, inmate canteen sales. So if our inmate population buys a candy bar, anything that would be considered profit off of that candy bar that the sheriff's office sells goes directly back into this fund here. Also, on our inmate tablet systems, they can purchase movies, video games, things like that through those tablets with money that they have on their books. That would also go back into this fund. All expenditures must show a benefit back to the inmate population out of this. So we mostly use it for inmate programs, inmate education, provide indigent packages to those inmates that do not have money on their books. And also all of inmate forms and things like that are printed on that. So in medical request forms, things like that, that can all be, we could utilize the Inmate Services Fund for that. We're forecasted at about $14.7 million for FY25. And just a quick fun fact, out of this fund, we currently offer nearly 250 different programs, both English and Spanish, and that's both in-person and tablet programs that we've created to put out on the tablet platform.
Just a quick question on that, if I could. When you say programs, you mean like educational or like work skill development?
Yep, educational, work skill development, substance abuse programs, things like that.
Thank you.
So the detention fund, it's definitely it wears a lot of hats, and what doesn't it do? I put this slide up there just to show that while MCSO is a big share of this, we're certainly not the only agency, and I know you guys have all been briefed on that, but that touches this. I think those top four are probably the lion's share, and that's MCSO, Correctional Health Services, and then Adult and Juvenile Probation. But you can kind of see some of those other agencies out there that do one way or another are supported by the detention fund. So countywide, that FY25 budget for the detention fund all across all those agencies is at about $555 million. $270 million of that is generated by the sales tax, as we were discussing earlier. And then those maintenance of effort funds are the big bolster behind that. But one thing that is unique over there with MCSO is we have per diem revenue, and that's at about $22.9 million for this next fiscal year. And I kind of want to explain that because that is booking fees and daily per diem that we charge to municipal agencies for misdemeanor bookings. And I just want to be clear about that because the sheriff's office, both constitutionally and statutorily, we're there to serve the Superior Court for those individuals that they feel cannot be out in the community for various reasons. So we make sure they get to court. Well, those are on felonies and those few county misdemeanors and things like that. On those bookings, we foot the bill. That's what we're here for, and that's what we do. But if a municipality, just any one of our cities out there, if they decide not to have their own county jail or use some other service and they have a misdemeanor that's sentenced to jail time in their city court and they choose to use our services, then statutorily we charge a booking fee and per diem for the daily fees. And then there's, so coming up here in this next fiscal year, those will be at $640 for booking and $137 for that daily fee. And then there's about another $50 million in that makes up that 555 to round it out. And those are basically the miscellaneous non-recurring funds that fund all those different agencies. So what I'm here for is to talk about how that affects MCSO and how we utilize the detention fund. So our current fiscal year 25 detention budget with operating costs and non-recurring is $289 million. So if you kind of just some comparison numbers there, we're a little over 50% of the detention fund and about 7% more than what the jail tax is currently bringing in. So how do we put that money to work? What does it do? Staffing. I think, whether you're in the private sector, you're public sector, generally your largest costs are personnel costs. And we are a big operation to staff. We currently have 1,890 assigned detention positions of all ranks. And one thing a lot of people don't realize, we have over 300 civilian positions out there that are funded out of the detention fund. And they can be working anywhere from just regular administrative positions to our canteen staff to classification. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. And I wish that my 1,890 positions were all filled right now. We do have some pretty significant vacancies, so I can apologize ahead of time, but I get to do my shameless plug here that we are hiring. And it just so happens that tonight from 3 to 7 p.m. we have a walk-in hiring event, so I won't be offended if everybody's on their phones letting their loved ones know, because we'd love to have them come down and work for us.
Just a quick question on your staffing levels. How do they compare by best practices, standards? Is that something you could bring back to us, or if you know off the top of your head?
Like as in comparison to other agencies?
Yeah, either other counties, or if there's a standard for X number of detention officers per inmate population, something like that.
Yes, we could probably find that because there are some standards out there like ACA standards and things like that we could probably take a look at. That's something I don't have off the top of my head. But as far as our staffing vacancies, that is definitely something that we are seeing across the country. We were almost fully staffed for the first time in my career, and then this big thing called COVID hit, and it just decimated our staffing, and it happened everywhere across the country. And you can imagine people like me, I've come up through detention, and I love this job, but if there were other options out there for the young crowd that had come in and they were scared, and there was a lot of things going on during that time, and we lost a lot of staff. So we're doing everything we can right now to climb out of that. Our staff is amazing out there. That's what's keeping our jails safe and operational. So what else are we putting that money to work for? Our jail operations. This is what everybody pictures. You say detention fund, they're picturing that the detention officer out there doing a security walk, escorting an inmate from A to B. So I kind of just threw some numbers in here just to see like what's actually out there, and just think of the staffing and things that are going on behind each one of these. We currently have 5 jails, plus our large intake, transfer, and release facility, which also has a small 500-bed jail attached to it. We call it the Durango Detention Center, so that technically is bigger than a lot of jail systems in the other counties in the state. So you could call that a 6th jail. Over 80,000 bookings each year. Our current jail population is just under 7,000, and we can, with our current operations, we could hold almost 9,000 inmates in our jails. Just a quick number right there. Jail operations aren't just that going from A to B. We're moving 500 to 800 inmates every day to court and back. That's Monday through Friday. That never ends. And that does not include all the transports that we're doing for new bookings coming in off the street, going out to the hospitals, things like that. So we currently have, I believe, 5 buses and around 33 vans that accomplish this. And then the staff that have to drive those. But are we more than just jails? So this is kind of a list of those jails I was just mentioning out there. But I can assure you there's a whole lot more going behind the scenes to support a 7,000 inmate population. It's going a little slow, so I apologize for that. These that are popping up right now, this is just a small smattering. This isn't even everything, but these are all the individual divisions and units that actually make up the custody bureau and that support what we do every day in the jails. And you can just see how that detention fund, for all the things that we're mandated to do to maintain those constitutionally sound jails. So I like to say one big team with a common goal, maintaining constitutionally sound, safe, and fiscally responsible jails to keep our communities safe. And that's what Sheriff Skinner has entrusted me with, and I take that responsibility very seriously. But that leads us in. We keep saying jails. Well, the jails are what make the headlines. They're on the TV shows. We kind of know what that looks like. So when I was asked to come here today to talk about how we use those funds, I think we can all picture the jail detention officer out there working in a housing unit, but what's going on behind the scenes to actually support that? So I'm going to have some stats coming up and some different areas, and I'm hoping some of them are pretty impressive to you guys. So SIMS, it's our Sheriff's Information Management section. Every single piece of paperwork that comes out of a court in this county, if it affects one of our in-custody inmates, it goes through SIMS. They're the gatekeepers for any inmate that ever gets released from our facilities. They're the ones that make sure that everything's been adjudicated and everything is good to go on that release. And they also take all the bonds and fines for Maricopa County. So last year, they processed over $22 million in bonds and fines, over 100,000 court orders, managed to maintain 44,000 new inmate files, and they also have our basically in-person public window for questions and things like that, and also for accepting those bonds and fines. Another one, the inmate classification unit. These are absolute unsung heroes, and in my mind, I call them the first line of safety and security in the jails. We've all heard of a maximum inmate or a minimum inmate, whether you've been involved in the business or you've seen it on TV. But if I could sum up one thing to show just how important they are, I call it the DUI myth. That's because every couple of years we'll have an incident in a jail, an assault or something like that. And the question will come up, why did you have that guy housed? He was only in here on a DUI. Why was he housed in here with this guy? And you can name the felony, aggravated assault or something that this guy is charged with. And these are all, mostly pretrial detainees that we have. This has truly happened. You have a guy that comes in there on a DUI. Well, it just shows that there's more than current charges that go into those classifications. That guy might have got a DUI because he was celebrating just getting out of 20 years in prison on a homicide conviction. I mean, that's the reality of what it is. And if it wasn't for these people right here, we wouldn't know that. And we might have housed that guy as a minimum, and he could have institutional history, street gang violence, things like that. And so every single individual that comes in our intake and that is going to stay with us in jail, that crew right there goes back in at least 10 years of institutional history. If they've ever been in jail, prison, a lockup, if they've ever been arrested, charged, anything like that, they pull that full rap sheet, they contact those other agencies, they get institutional history, and they put it into a validated instrument to score that individual on how they get classified. And they do all that. They did that 40,000 times last year on initial classifications and 10,000 reclassifications. And they're 24/7, 365. They never stop. And I always have to include our food services division. It is massive. If you start picturing feeding 7,000 individuals, we're 150,000 square feet. We're the largest non-commercial food production center in the state, serving 14,000 meals a day. What does it take? How about 1.1 million pounds of peanut butter a year? I can assure you, if you think you get bulk pricing at Costco, though, we're getting good deals on this stuff. But you can see where some of these funds have to go. Our bakery, 100,000 rolls every week, over 2 million pounds of fruit a year, and almost 1 million pounds of vegetables a year. And then within that food services division is our warehouse. And you can just imagine all the staff. And this is where a lot of our civilian staff work too. And we also use inmate labor out there to assist on this. But our warehouse, I mean, we handle 800,000 pounds of food every week. So that's all those trucks coming in, leaving 35,000 square feet of, I say, drive-in freezers, because you could drive a truck through that. And these are some important things that happen in the detention bureau. We have a large ice plant out there that can produce 1.5 million pounds of ice every year, and we store that in there for emergencies. So some of you guys, we had a high-profile incident here a couple years ago where we did a big operation at a landfill here in Maricopa County looking for a homicide victim. And it was a large operation right in the heat of the summer. Well, because we have these abilities, we were able to keep all of those volunteers and law enforcement staff cool and provide cold drinks and things right there. That's just kind of an idea of just beyond emergencies of how those things are used. We also store a minimum of a 14-day supply of sack lunches out there, which there's currently over 200,000 being stored. So on the left top up there, that's those 200,000 meals that are stored, and then you can kind of see down here on the right, that's some of our ice down there. It takes a big crew to keep this operation running. So kind of to end here, ancillary and institutional services. There is, I believe, over 160 staff members in just this area alone, and I really like to highlight it because it's areas that people often don't think about when we're talking about detention fund and jails, but we could not operate without them. I'll just touch on a couple of these, and then I got a couple of slides to close it out. But like the Bureau Hearing Unit, if you watch the movies and you think there's a detention officer out there that gets ruffled and he goes and throws somebody in the hole, and using those kind of terminology that floats around out there, that's just not simply the case. So we have an entirely staffed hearing unit made up of line supervisors and above, that if there's an infraction out there, inmate it gets written up by an officer, it goes through and they have a full due process. And these are things that are required and so that we have to have in operations. Like, we just make this stuff up to spend these dollars is what I'm saying. We have a full due process. That inmate gets a hearing. They review all the video. They're talking to the inmate. They're talking to staff. And then they, when that hearing is done, decide whether or not there is going to be discipline and what that discipline will be. Inmate legal services is the other one I'll touch on. They're out there. If you have a pro per inmate, they're representing themselves, but they're in custody. They're unable to file things directly to the court, obviously, and things like that. So we have a fully staffed by MCSO unit out there that is able to file those paperwork for them. They can notarize documents. They can provide case law when it's requested. The one thing they can't do is provide legal advice, and we do not get into that. And then next couple of slides will kind of show just some of these areas. That's our distribution fleet up there. You can imagine moving that much food, laundry, things like that out to our various jail facilities. It takes quite a crew, and our distribution commander gave me a cool stat here a couple of years back. He said that they did a little study, and that these trucks basically drive in any given day the same amount of distance in reverse as forward, because it's such short trips, and they're backing up to all these docks, and it's kind of a fun fact. I just wish the mileage just kept going down. You keep the value, but it doesn't work like that. So just a couple of last stats here. 1.5 million pounds of laundry every year. 8 million items sold in inmate canteen. That's a lot of Snickers bars right there. And our custodial staff, if you want to talk about detention funds, our custodial staff, they provide service to over 2 million square feet. And there's a reason that we employ our own custodial staff, because most of that is in the secure area of our jails. So we do have contracted cleaning services and things throughout the county and the sheriff's office for administrative areas, but we employ our own that have clearance to actually be inside the jails there. 1,000+ pieces of mail come in every single day. So we also have to staff a full mail room, because every single one of those pieces of mail has to be inspected for contraband, drugs, things like that. And that Bureau hearing unit that I just discussed, those are just some stats from last year. 23,000 inmate grievances they did hearings on, and 19,000 disciplinary action reports they did hearings on. And I feel like I just scratched the surface, and I just rattled off a lot to you guys. There's so much more to what we do, and I'm so proud of our staff and what they do every day. So I just wanted to extend to the committee, if you guys ever want to schedule a tour of any one of those areas I talked about, or to see anything, we invite it. We love to show off what we do out there, so we would love to be able to show you guys around at any given time. And then that's kind of the end. My 14-year-old daughter says everybody smiles at the horse's noses, so I figured we could end a jail discussion on something happy. And there's my buddy Winchester pretty much knocking me into his water trough. So. But we'll close that off, and if there's any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them if I can.
Thank you, Chief. It was a great presentation. You?
Yeah, wonderful presentation, great overview. Two questions. One, you mentioned sentence versus detainees. Of the 7,000, how many are detainees versus actually sentenced?
I actually don't have that stat off the top of my head, but it's generally around 10%, so we're probably in that 700 to 800 number is possibly in there. I can get that to the committee.
It's okay. Sure. And then I know this is something you probably don't want to talk about since you were totally almost full in 2019. What is your vacancy rate now?
So we are sitting at about 780 vacancies out of that 1,890 positions right now in detention. So it's tough, and our staff are true heroes out there for what they do, because they are maintaining that safe jail for our community.
Thank you so much.
Mayor, any questions?
No, great presentation, and nice to see Winchester the horse smiling.
I can't quite hear.
Anybody know what the mayor said other than kudos?
You're a little quiet.
What's that?
Oh.
You like pictures of the horse? Well done. It was the appropriate end of that horse, so that was
And
good.
Vice Chair, it looks like someone has joined by phone.
Okay.
Can we just check and see who is on the line?
Oh, it's Dr. Noggle?
Okay, perfect.
Brian, Dr. Noggle, any questions?
I have none.
Getting the
Thank
wave
you.
off. So no, thank you, Chief. That's great.
Thank you so much for the time.
All right, I guess with that, CJ and Tyson for an update on the jail master plan.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. As I was introduced earlier, my name is CJ Jones. I'm the Director of Facilities Management for Maricopa County, so directly responsible for all county facilities, which includes the detention facilities from a facilities perspective. With me today is Tyson Logan. Tyson actually served and retired from the Sheriff's Office and now works at Facilities Management as one of our capital project managers. Tyson is also leading the effort for the current, what we're calling Master Plan Refresh. So he was also around and part of the original team that did the master plan from 2013. Okay. So, clicker, there we go. So I was asked to give an overview of the current master plan that we're operating under. And that master plan started in September of 2013, or was commissioned in September 2013 and finished about June of 2014. It was prepared by Arrington Watkins Architects and CGL in partnership with FMD and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and other partners, Correctional Health Services and other entities involved in the detention system. The master plan goals were to provide a 10-year detention facilities master plan from 2014 to 2024, develop creative solutions for the use of current facilities and future needs with the objective of replacing aging facilities and improving existing jail sites, and identify costs and schedules associated with renovations of existing facilities, demolition of older jails, and construction of new detention facility options. The next slide, I just pulled out some of the deficiencies identified in the master plan. It's about a 3-inch thick document that has many things covered in it, but just a brief overview. At the time the master plan was established in 2013, 2014, the deficiencies identified were campus security and access to the downtown Phoenix and Durango sites were the two campuses that the detention facilities we operate reside at. Increasing close custody and maximum populations created a need for beds in the system, had a hard time at the time supporting. Lack of program spaces, lack of properly located supplies and medical storage facilities, lack of medical space, lack of confidential space for medical purposes, attorney visits, et cetera. The current intake, or at the time, the intake, transfer, and release facility was in the 4th Avenue Jail, which we'll talk about a little bit as we get further into the presentation. A lack of proper staff workspace, transportation areas were deficient, which also got addressed during the time of the one of the projects, which is the ITR project we'll talk about. Lack of ADA facilities, sentence population facilities didn't, again, provide sufficient programs, and parking was inadequate. So you get a pretty good idea of the breadth of issues that were occurring at the detention facilities and why we needed to address it. So through the master plan process, I believe they landed on about 7 options with several sub-options underneath them, and ultimately landed on 3 of those 7 options, ended up with about 3 options for consideration. And then in red there, I highlighted the ultimate option that was selected to move forward with back in 2013 to 2014. And that was the Durango focus option, so focusing on the Durango campus detention facility as opposed to downtown or a bed focus. So I pulled that one option that was selected to move forward with, and at the time when the master plan was finished and it was decision time to say, okay, what projects do we need to execute from the master plan from this option? The first project that was selected, and I'll get to it in the bullet points here, was the ITR facility in Watkins, what's now known as the Watkins Jail. It was sort of done out of sequence, and at the time, while I wasn't here, my understanding is it was done because of budget constraints, and maybe it was the most logical thing to go after first. The first phase at the time was to relocate MASH, which is currently still in our 1st Avenue Jail, and then add medical screening remodel to the 4th Avenue Jail. That obviously, the 4th Avenue piece kind of went away, and the MASH piece still hasn't been addressed, although we are working on that on other projects in the county to try to get MASH out of that facility so that we can ultimately demolish it, which was one of the recommendations at the time. Number 2, listed a new administration building, parking, perimeter fence, new road, main entry, upgrades to Estrella and LBJ jails, and upgrade to meet benchmark standards at 4th Avenue. The administration building was never done. The 4th Avenue piece changed because the ITR ended up getting built out at the Durango campus. Number 3 was the new 72-hour on the master plan. It's listed as a 1024. Chief Mike Dawson talked about the 512, so we ended up building half of that facility as part of the Watkins ITR facility. The other 512 is a future expansion to that facility. Number 4 was to remodel the medical screening in the 4th Avenue Jail. Again, didn't move forward because the intake portion moved out to the ITR. Number 5, so this was built. So what's called the 1024 in item 5 there actually became known as the 1280, which is the Watkins Jail, right? And that was completed and occupied up and running in spring of 2020. Recommendation number 6, or phase number 6, would have been to clear the existing tent locations, relocate sentence housing, male and female, and a new tower support building and new sentenced housing support. The tents locations went away when Sheriff Penzone took office. And then there was ultimately a plan in the master plan to address the sentence housing with barrack-type housing, and that did not move forward. The inmates in tents and contents ended up getting distributed into the existing capacity in the jails. Make sure I'm on track here. Okay, number 7 was to demo the tower core, or Towers Jail core, which was, I think, the support building or administrative building. Demo the First Avenue Jail, which is, I mentioned, where MASH is currently. Demo the Madison Street Jail, which has since been renovated and turned into an office space, so that kind of happened a different path. And then an additional 512 facility out at the Durango campus, which would have been the another high custody facility. That did not happen. So at the time, phases 1 through 7 were estimated about $456 million. As I talked through this, obviously only certain parts and pieces of this plan were executed. That was in 2014 dollars. Those would obviously be very different today. So in fall of last year, I provided a recommendation to do a jail master plan refresh, not necessarily go do a brand new master plan, but let's peel open the one that we have and see what we finished and what we really need to focus on moving forward. We have since hired Arrington Watkins Architects, who was part of the team that did the original master plan, to assist us in updating the current master plan. Through that master plan refresh, we're really taking a facility-based focus to see what the conditions of the facilities are, from just an overall facility condition and then the facility conditions for the inmates from an ACA standard perspective. The facilities there now, so Estrella Jail and Towers Jail most notably, are now 10 years older than they were when the original master plan were done. So the facility condition assessment numbers, when they do come out, will obviously be more likely worse than they were 10 years ago. Again, mentioned facility needs, and the plan is focusing purely on future bed needs. We're hoping to have that plan completed June or July of this year, and ultimately we'll present that. And then just provided some age of the existing facilities. Again, I mentioned they're about 10 years older than they were when the original master plan, well, not the original, the last master plan was provided. So Estrella Jail was built and commissioned in 91, Towers Jail 82, 4th Avenue 2004, same thing for the Lower Buckeye Jail, and then Madison Street Jail. So I mentioned we're working through the jail master plan refresh. We are kind of starting to get some initial figures from the jail master plan refresh. On the surface, it looks like we're probably somewhere north of $1 billion in needed upgrades or new facilities. That number needs to be further refined, but it's more than likely not going to go down. And then just some on-the-surface projections based on what our consultant has started to find from MCSO's projections on inmate numbers is by 2029, there's going to be somewhere north of a 3,000 bed deficit. With that, that's a very quick and brief version of probably what's a 400-page document, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, CJ. Any questions?
I just have one. You provided us with the estimate of the 7 original, and it would have been $456 million. How much did we actually spend on what we did? Do you have that off the top of your head? And if you don't, I apologize.
Sure. So I do know the ITR facility was somewhere around $100 million. But as Mike Dawson mentioned, those tax dollars go to a lot of other functions in the county. So it was, at the time, not necessarily that budget was allocated just for the detention facility. It was used for the ITR and then obviously some of the other juvenile facilities and other functions that serve under that 255 detention fund.
Any others? Folks online? Mayor?
Jason, CJ, this would be directed to you. The 2013-2014 plan was a 10-year time frame. Is the upgrade of the update, I should say, is that also a 10-year time period?
Yeah, so we've asked, I think the question was if the current plan was 10 years, if we're doing the same thing this time around, and we've asked our consultants for a 15-year projection.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from our online members? No, I guess then.
Yes, can you hear me? This is
yeah, Don, go ahead.
yes. I'm sorry because I missed the first 30 minutes. Has there been a plan yet to remove the remanded juveniles to the juvenile facility?
Can we try to turn up the volume?
Dr. Nagel was asking the question about the juveniles that used to be housed in MCSO that now have been moved over to juvenile probation detention.
So Mike Dawson might be better fit to answer that, or maybe Tyson. I'm not familiar with the operations side of MCSO and juvenile detention.
Chief, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, Dr. Nagel, I believe your question was if there have been conversations about moving the remanded population over to county juvenile. There was a change in the courts here just in the last couple of years, and now the court themselves, not all remands come to the sheriff's office anymore. So we went from having, in years past, up to 200 remanded juveniles in our custody to at any time we could maybe have 30. So that entire thing has changed, I guess, at this point. So we actually work very closely with county juvenile. They were actually just in our facilities a couple weeks ago with their judges and what have you that actually make those decisions from the bench about where they're going to be housed. So that's where we're at with that right now. Our juvenile population is much, much lower.
But isn't it true that having 30, you still have to provide education and all of the services?
Absolutely true. Yeah, we're still mandated to provide them. We have our full high school, accredited high school right there within the sheriff's office for those remanded juveniles, and they do require a lot of services and staff devoted to them.
Chief, just because I think you were the only one who heard the question and understood it, could you repeat it just for the record so that we can take a note?
I believe what Dr. Nagel had stated is, isn't it true even if you only have 20 or 30 that you would still have to be required to provide them their full juvenile education services and all the services that go along with that, and that is correct.
Cool, thank you. Would it be possible for us to get a copy of the 2014 master plan for just our record and review if we feel like it, and then hopefully ask Danny to see if it's possible, if the timing works out when the updated version comes out, if we could maybe get another update on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely want to have them come back around the time that it's finished. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, one more. Sorry.
One quick question. I would think that the refresh it will actually kind of do the retread from the 2014. I don't know how you're setting it up, Tyson, but you may not need both. I think the more important one is probably, and you said June or July, CJ, is that right?
Correct. Yeah. No,
Because
we are.
I can tell you the other plan is this thick.
Yeah.
And Tyson, hopefully it's not that thick this time.
Yeah, it'll be a bit more focused than the first one on really what the immediate needs are for the facilities and for the next 15 years. It doesn't get into, the other master plan got into a lot of the operations side of the detention facilities, and this was just solely focused on facilities. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Guess we'll move on to item 6, director's report. Danny?
All right. All right, thank you. I'll be real brief. I just wanted to give you guys a couple of updates on some of the stuff we're working on. So on May 5th and 6th, there'll be a 2-day gathering, the Criminal Justice Symposium. And so we are working with the County Supervisors Association and other stakeholders to prepare for that. So I will attend both days and report out. So I wanted to give you a heads up that that is in the works and something that I think should be a really timely conversation for this committee. And then I just want to briefly talk about our upcoming schedule. We have 2 meetings scheduled in May, and we hope to have some more substantive presentations to go through. So we are going to hear from adult probation and from juvenile probation, and then probably correctional health and a couple other departments that are impacted by this fund. We also are going to have the County Supervisors Association come in and give a kind of statutory framework of what's allowed in statute and how other counties handle funding public safety. So we'll have that coming up next week, or 2 weeks from now, next meeting. And then we are hopeful that we'll have an introductory presentation from our consultants once they're on board as well. So that will be at one of the main meetings. And then hopefully we'll get some tours going in June. I know the chief offered tours, so he's going to regret saying that because I'm going to call him after this meeting and we're going to get those on the works. So that'll be our plan going forward in June. And then we definitely will have CJ back once the master plan is done for another update. So just want to give you some notes on what's on the horizon. We'll have a more detailed schedule once things get confirmed. But is there any questions on those? Okay.
Sounds
That
like
is
no
my director's
questions.
report.
Thank you. I guess we'll move on to item 7, move into executive session for the item that's noted on the executive session agenda. Can I get a motion to recess and to convene in executive session?
So moved.
Second, anywhere?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Ayes have it, and we're in executive session. Thank you.
Jason, if you can still hear me, do we stay on this link or do we go to a new one?
So,
What are we doing?
so there is an executive session invite that I sent out to everybody, so that has a separate link. So if you guys can hop
Yeah,
off
I
this
have the
one and
same
hop on the
question.
executive
If they're
committee
not
one.
answering, looks like we might have to do another link.
Okay.
I think they sent a separate executive session agenda, and there might be a different link on that. Or I don't know
Yeah.
if it's in our mailbox or not.
Okay.
Do we wait?
Let us come back in first. Okay, it's 2:45 and we're back on the record in the regular session for item number 8. Possible discussion, possible action on retention of committee consultants. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I motion to have the staff, county staff delegate to the consultants choosing. Hold on. Motion to delegate the selection of the consultants to the staff. Does that make sense?
That work for you, Emily? Great.
Okay.
Okay, do you have a second? I second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. And with that, Danny, any other items we needed to
I don't think so.
update? No? Okay, well, with that, your meeting's adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.